the other thing too with planet Earth is that Earth is one of the few planets that's still stuck in the third dimension. And so the reason why extraterrestrial beings are so interested in seeing us ascend is because if we don't ascend here on Earth, they can't ascend any further. So it's kind of holding back the ascension for all of these systems, not just our system. So so there is a vested interest to see Earth succeed, in the ascension process, so that we can all become part of the greater galactic family.
Welcome to a Broaderlenspodcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlenspodcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlenspodcast. I'm grateful to have you on because I know you're a lot of people want you on, so thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to learning from you. Maybe you can walk us into a little bit of what you do and who you are, if you don't mind me asking.
Oh, yeah, go right. Okay, I'll go ahead and do that. So my name is Debbie Solaris, and, people wonder, well, what does that mean? Who is she? What does she do? And I'm basically a galactic akashic reader guide. At least that's how I started my spiritual journey. So I was having access to the records, and there's a long story behind that. But I'm also a galactic historian and a starseed intuitive. So I help the coach. I do transformational coaching. So I help, people to align with their true potential and their true missions, So, and a lot of that entails, folks, folks going ahead and, just delving into who they are, who they truly are, and sometimes we can find out more about that through the Akashic records. Just to explain what the Akashic records are, to folks maybe in your audience that don't know what that is, the Akashic records is the energetic records of the universe. So there's records on every single being that's ever existed or will exist or was going to exist. So the records are very vast, and it does. It is not a physical place, so it's not, say, a library or a physical building. It's actually in the higher dimensional realms in the universe. So, people have the capacity of accessing these records and getting information from them. A lot of people use them maybe to explore past lives, but you can also explore, alternate dimensional realities, and also maybe even your future potential lifetime.
Well, thank you. And I know Nikola Tesla, or was it Einstein, that kind of mentioned the Akashic records without mentioning it, along with the Bible and, in Hindu scriptures, it's a Sanskrit word.
Akasha actually means life in Sanskrit. So, so they, the Vedic, the people that, were working with the Vedic principles were actually working also with the Akashic records. So it's been in use for thousands and thousands of years.
In the Bible, doesn't it mention something like the Book of Life, or it kind of mentions something similar?
Yeah, totally. So a lot of people don't realize that the Akashic records and the Book of Life is the one and the same thing. So the Bible even talks about the Akashic records. They talk about how if you have access to the Book of Life, you have more power than anybody, because you have information, So I remember reading that, when I was much younger, because I went to a Christian university, so I studied, the Bible, it was required, but I remember reading that and I was like, wow, what is this Book of Life? Does anybody, how do you get access to that? And then, later on, in life, once I became awakened and started working with the Akashic records, I started realizing, oh, okay, that's what the Bible was talking about. So, yeah, absolutely.
Are there gatekeepers for the Akashic record?
You mean Akashic guides? Yes, there are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the Akashic guides are Arcturian beings. And for those that aren't familiar with ufology or with, the extraterrestrial races, the Arcturians are a star race of beings that pretty much gatekeep a stargate which processes souls after death and before their next incarnations. So it makes sense that since they're processing souls, they would also be the keepers of the Akashic records. So I would say maybe not all of them, but I would say the majority of the Akashic guides are likely Arcturians. At least that's been my experience, and they basically assist you when you're in the records. So a lot of your audience might be wondering, well, how do I access the records? How do you do this thing? And basically, it's just connecting, raising your vibration and connecting your vibration with the higher realm dimensions. And you do this through kind of a white column exercise. I teach about this in my Akashic course, and just by meditating, centering yourself, connecting yourself with Earth and also with the higher realms, you can gain access to the records. There's also a prayer process you can use. There's various types of Akashic invocations and prayers. A lot of people like the Linda Howe, but for those, the Linda Howe method, she was the mother of Akashic records teaching, so she was the one that pioneered it, at least in our timeline. But a lot of people consider her prayer a little bit too Christian, so there's other alternate prayers you can use that can also access the records. I don't have a problem with the Christian components because I was raised Roman Catholic, so I still use Linda Howe's method, but there's alternate prayers. And you don't really need to do the prayer. It's just kind of like setting the stage for connecting, if that makes sense. And do you work with the Akashic records, Boo Boo, or
No,
or do you know?
I haven't. I know about
Okay.
them. I had a couple people on that talked about the Akashic records. I knew about it before I started this podcast, but I have Linda's book on the Akashic records. So I'm familiar with it, but I'm not really deep into it. No.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
Well, I heard you had an awakening. You had a contact experience in 2012, and I know you didn't come in like this. You said you had an experience in 2012. Is that correct? And then you were
That's
downloaded
correct.
all kinds of information. I think that's profound. Maybe you can touch on that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So people might, sometimes wonder, how do you get started in doing this kind of work? And for a lot of people, they've been on the spiritual path for a while, and they take certain, spiritual classes. In my case, it was very abrupt, so it was like one day I was totally asleep, and then the next day I was completely awakened to, not just who I am, but also to my gifts. So to explain the story, or to share the story, I'll give you a little bit of background information, and then we'll get into the story itself. But I just want people to be aware that I didn't grow up, doing this kind of work, so I wasn't exposed to it, so it was, I had a very ordinary kind of life. I was a military brat. My father was in the military. We traveled a lot. And then I was also in the military myself for a number of years. A lot of people don't realize this, but I am a Navy veteran, so I spent 6 years in the U.S. Navy. And I did very unspiritual work. So I was trained as a hospital corpsman, but my specialty was environmental health or preventive medicine, as they called it. But so I did a lot of kind of like scientific type of work, and so I was living in that really realistic realm. I never really got interested in the paranormal or the UFOs or anything like that. I got a little bit of a consciousness expansion when I started dating my now husband, because he was interested in UFOs and he would read articles about them. And I was, like, what the heck is he reading about? And if you were to meet my husband, he's like the straightest dude ever. I mean, it's like he would be the least likeliest person you would ever think would be interested in the paranormal. But he was totally into it. So I started reading a few articles here and there, but I was still very, very skeptical. Eventually, I did. I started taking a couple of spiritual classes here and there, but it was just kind of minimal kind of stuff, just very basic spirituality, nothing really in depth. But around 2012, I had not just one, but two extraterrestrial contact experiences. And wow. I'm just not the kind of person that would ever imagine myself having that kind of experience. It just was not even in my periphery. So basically what happened was one night I couldn't sleep, so I was worried about the state of the planet. And so I sent this prayer out to the universe, and I sent it out to the angelic realm, Mother Mary, Jesus, the usual religious characters, but also, ascended masters. But also I extended it out to galactic brothers and sisters. And why I said that, I don't know. I mean, there's something that popped in at the last minute. So I said my prayer that one night, and then, went to bed. Everything was normal. The next day, nothing happened. And this went on for 2 weeks, and I forgot about the prayer. Well, about 2 weeks after I said the prayer, I went to sleep as normal, and I had when I came back into consciousness, I realized I was in some other reality. So, so I don't want to get too much into detail because we have a limited amount of time, and you probably have a lot of questions for me. But just to give you the overview of the story, I found that I was in another dimension. And I knew it wasn't a dream because it felt very, very real. It felt like more real than being, that, if you can imagine that. Details were very sharp, colors were brilliant. That's how, the higher dimensional realms are like. You see everything seems a lot more sharp and brilliant. And when I was looking around, I realized I was in an extraterrestrial ship, and the ship looked very organic. It was made of light and plasma-like material, was not a metallic type of ship. And a lot of the extraterrestrial ships are not metallic. They have technologies that are even beyond our comprehension. But I ended up meeting up with not just one, but several extraterrestrial beings who told me they were Arcturians from the star system of Arcturus in the Bootes constellation, which really blew my mind because I didn't even know what that was at the time. But they were able to telepathically communicate with me, and even before I would finish a sentence in my head or a question, they would answer my question. So that's how immediate telepathy can be. So I spent quite a bit of time with the Arcturians. They told me that I was actually part of their soul family, that I've chosen to incarnate on Earth to do this work, to have, to fulfill my mission of assisting with the ascension process. And I was asking them a lot of questions about what the heck was going on planet Earth, because it seems like things were going to hell in a handbasket, and they told me that the third dimensional reality is actually kind of a false matrix construct. So it's not real. And they kept using the word illusion, that everything in the 3D is an illusion. It's not real. And I was thinking, well, gosh, everything seems real to me, so I didn't quite understand it, but they told me that several times. And they told me a lot of things about what was happening on planet Earth. And one of the things they told me, which really struck a chord with me, was, like I mentioned before, I was raised Roman Catholic. I went to a Christian university, so I have a background in, Bible studies. And along with science, I guess. So I was, asking them about religion. And I said, what religion do you follow? And they said, we don't follow a religion. That's a man-made construct. They said, religion, we have a direct connection with source, or they call it God. What you call God, we call it source. So we don't need to have an intermediary to develop a relationship with source. And that just blew my mind, because like I said, I was raised Roman Catholic, and there was always intermediaries, whether it be the priest or Jesus or somebody, so that just blew my mind. I was like, wow, I guess we don't really need religion, to have a relationship with God, And they also told me that politics was pretty false, that both parties in United States government were both basically flip sides of the same coin, that they were both corrupt, and not to align with any political parties, because it's not like one is better than the other, so I was never that much into politics anyway, but after that, I just became an undeclared independent. I don't really care to align with any political parties, because they both have corruption, within the parties. But beyond, just having them answer questions, I was able to wander the ship and see other parts of the starship. I interacted with other extraterrestrial beings, and there was beings on this ship that, there was hundreds of beings. It was a huge ship. It was like maybe even city-sized. It was huge. And there was a lot of different star beings that were of different star races. And so you could tell, because they all had, I would say the majority of them were humanoid. There might have been a few that weren't, that maybe were amphibian or, some sort of alternate star race. But the majority of them were humanoid. But they had variations that you could tell that they were not from the same race of beings, so that was interesting to interact with those beings. And that was in May 2012. And then I had a second experience on board the same starship with the same beings in December 2012. But even after the first experience, I knew when I woke up, so what happened was, after I had my visit on board the ship, I woke up and I was back in my bed, back in 3D. But I knew that something extraordinary had happened, and that my life was never going to be the same. And that was when all of my extrasensory perception came online. I was like, wow, I'm starting to see auras around everything. And I'm seeing, colors and lights and dimensions. I'm starting to read frequency and seeing UFOs all the time, and telepathically communicating with a UFO. It was just crazy. I went from being totally this ordinary, non-gifted person into somebody that was downloading loads and loads of galactic information. I call them downloads, so I was getting downloads of these information. And it was mainly about star systems and star races and their history and what happened in the past and what happened in alternate dimensions. And it was kind of like I questioned it at first, because I was like, I have never seen anything like this. I've never heard about this, never read about it. I went to university. I have a degree, so never learned about any of this kind of thing. So at first I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was losing it. But then I thought, well, I need to research and find out if this is really real and if other people are talking about the same thing. And sure enough, there were people talking about this kind of thing. One of them was Alex Collier, Lissa Royale Holt, Dolores Cannon, and Edgar, I mean, there was a lot of people talking about this, and so I was like, okay, I guess maybe it's not so crazy. And at this time, I was also taking a lot of spiritual classes. So, I mean, instead of just taking, spirituality 101, I was getting, was taking different types of spiritual classes, so I was just really, broadening my horizons, I guess. But, and I'm fortunate enough to live in Colorado where, we have a very strong spiritual community here, especially in the Front Range. And I know you guys are the same in Arizona. You got pretty strong spiritual communities in Arizona, but here in Colorado, we have pretty much everything here, so, so everything was really, really cool, so so that's kind of how I got into the Akashic records, because I was continuously downloading information. I didn't know where it was coming from. And so I was taking a Reiki course in my hometown of Castle Rock, which is just south of Denver. And I was asking my Reiki teacher, where am I getting this information from? And she says, oh, it sounds like you're getting information from the Akashic records. And I didn't even know what they were until she explained it to me. And then she said, I also teach Akashic records reading classes if you're interested. And I was like, yeah, heck yeah, I'm interested, So even after I took, there was 3 levels. Even after I took level 1, I was starting to do readings. And so I was doing readings professionally. So I was doing Akashic readings probably for about 12 years. And I've done thousands and thousands of readings for people of all demographics all around the world. I don't do personal readings anymore. That was a decision I made last year. It was a really hard decision because I do enjoy the interactions with people, and I love seeing people getting that aha moment and really aligning with who they are. But it was just getting overwhelming. I had 3,000 people on my waiting list. I mean, it was just insane. I couldn't keep up with it anymore. And also, my guides were telling me, it's time that people learn to do this for themselves, instead of looking for others for answers, So that made a lot of sense to me. So as of late last year, I think it was around October, I just decided I wasn't going to do any more personal readings. And I developed a course that enabled me to teach people how to do readings, either for themselves or for others, So it's called the Galactic Akashic Reading Course. And we are currently on our 2nd cohort right now. So this is our 2nd year of offering the class. So if your listeners are interested, we're not taking new students now, but we will next year. So they can go on my website and join the waiting list. But it basically teaches you not just how to read the Akashic records, but to read the galactic Akashic records. So these are the records, not just of planet Earth, but of other star systems, other galaxies, other universes, even, if you wanted to go that far. So, so it's really expansive. And it's an 8-week-long course, and we really dive deep into the galactic star races and galactic history with this particular course. It's been extremely successful. I mean, we've had at least 300 students, each year join us, to take it, from all over the world. I mean, places I never even heard of, or don't know much about, but yeah, it's pretty amazing. And my hope is that all of us can develop our psychic and our intuitive abilities, so we don't have to go to a reader, to get answers, or take a class or do a training, I mean, we could, learn, and develop these skills for ourselves. So that's kind of, I guess, in a nutshell, what I'm about. The other thing I'm probably well known for is I'm a galactic historian, or at least that's what people call me. So So I know the history of quite a few of the star systems throughout our galaxy, and I do presentations, about these various star races and their history, which, a lot of people these days that are awakening find very fascinating. They connect with it. It helps trigger some sort of activation for a lot of them. And so I'm also doing quite a few presentations throughout this year on various aspects of galactic history. So I think my next event is going to be Disclosure Fest, and this is in June of this year, and that's in the LA area. So I'll be doing a workshop there. And then I'm also doing a spiritual retreat East Coast for a group, I guess it's called the Stargates Crusader. And that's in Connecticut. So if you're not on the West Coast and you're on the East Coast, people might want to consider attending that. That's like a weekend retreat. It's in a beautiful seaside town in Connecticut. So, if you're interested in what I do and you want to check it out, there's various opportunities. And I'm also going to be in Sedona again in October for the Cosmic Awakening Conference. Are you in Sedona or Phoenix area? I don't remember.
I'm in the West Phoenix area, Goodyear,
Oh, nice.
Estrella Mountain.
Okay.
And I've seen some crafts from up here in the mountain area.
Arizona gets a lot of UFOs. I think I used to live in Phoenix, and I think I lived in Phoenix and I saw the Phoenix lights, the real famous ones.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that like back in the 1990s. Yeah. And at the time I didn't know what I was looking at, but, I knew it was something strange, but now looking back on it, I'm like, oh gosh, I think I saw the Phoenix lights, and that was,
Wow.
So Phoenix and Sedona, they get a lot of UFO visitations, and there's a heavy vortex energy in your state. We have it also in Colorado, but it's in the San Luis Mountains, so it's not so much in the Front Range, but it's on the western slope, of Colorado. But yeah, there's many places you could go to, throughout the Southwest to do some UFO watching, and to connect with extraterrestrial craft.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to try to make one of those events for sure. I am looking at the one in California. Yeah.
Yeah.
The rooms are sold out, but I got to.
Yeah. Like a CE5 event. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know Dr. Greer personally?
I don't know him personally, but I did take his remote viewing course in Boulder, so I know who he is. Yeah, but I don't know him personally. But yeah, he pretty much pioneered the CE5 events, and they've been, really, really popular with people. So that's. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Now, what I find interesting is I had a recording with Les Valez not too long ago, and he's a researcher, UFO, who you may know, and he talked about the same thing with these ETs, that they don't call it God, but they call it Source. And do you find some of these ETs very spiritual? I mean, I know you hear mixed things about these ETs. Some are evil, or some are dark, and others are more like into the light and spirituality and want to help humanity. Others may want to kind of destroy humanity. And you talked about the elites a little bit. And I've heard you talk about this, and I've heard other people talk about this. I think there was a little girl that, I think she was in California, where she realized that all the presidents were related, which is pretty interesting. Is there a connection with the reptilians, like David Icke often says?
Yeah, I do believe that. I believe there's, if you look at the historical aspect of, these dark cabal or Illuminati groups, a lot of them are descendant of reptilian hybrid beings or reptilians that escaped to Earth after, the fall of the Orion Empire. So Orion was a system that, it's a huge constellation. There's a lot of stars, a lot of planets, a lot going on in Orion, a lot of diversity there. So much like Star Wars, there was a fight, a constant battle between the reptilian empire, the great, Zeta Reticuli and the gray aliens with the, the resistance fighters in the belt stars, because they wanted to maintain, light consciousness in these systems. They didn't want to become part of the dark evil empire. So there was constant fights, and I guess with the help of the Galactic Federation, the resistance, was able to achieve unity consciousness throughout Orion. And so the dark factions escaped. They didn't want to become assimilated into the light. So they escaped and they came to our solar system and initially started populating Mars and a planet called Maldek, which is now the asteroid belt. When Maldek became destroyed, they decided to move their operations, I think, to Mars, but it wasn't real successful. So they started infiltrating Atlantis. And that was when they started taking control and creating the third dimension on planet Earth. Because planet Earth originally was a fifth dimensional reality. And so I don't know if your other researcher was talking about this, but yeah, a lot of these beings establish themselves as royalty, so we see these reptilian genetics throughout various royal families, and people that are generally in control, so the 1%ers, as they call them. And so there are quite a few like extraterrestrial beings that are not of the light. They just want to conquer and control. But to answer your question, there's quite a few of them that are of the light, and they're highly, highly spiritual. The Arcturians fall in that category, Pleiadians, the Sirians, and Andromedans, and so forth. So they do consider themselves to have a personal relationship with Source. They don't call. I think God the word God established that this energy is better than you are, and it's not that. I don't think they want to establish this. Oh, I'm a peon and I'm connecting with this higher being. It's more of a direct connection. If that makes sense. So their viewpoint on God is probably very, very different than how people on Earth, those that are associate with certain religions would view God, if that makes sense. So they do have a relationship with God. It's just not. It's more of a a personal connection rather than, oh, I'm looking to you for help, or I'm looking for you to forgive me for my sins, or, whatever it is that, humans do here on Earth, so yes, and it depends on the race, I would say also that not all reptilians are evil. And I found this out through the Akashic records because, when I was first awakening, I read the David Icke, books and, saw some of the presentations on reptilians, and, they kind of always make it seem like they're all really horrible and evil. And not all of them are. There are some that have shifted to the light that are, very gifted healers. Now, are those beings on Earth? I don't know, but I did see them in some of the Syrian planets and also on Orion, but not all of them are evil. And the dragons are not considered, I don't consider them evil. I think they're more neutral in their polarities. So dragons just kind of do their own thing. But there's also within the reptilian race, so they're not all the same, if that makes sense.
In ancient civilizations, you've done some work on ancient civilizations, right? And where do we get like Kukulkan in the Americas, Mesoamerica? You'll see the dragon or the serpent, or you'll see, the Sumerians. Were they reptilians or Dracos, or who were the Anunnaki? Do you believe?
Yeah, so this is the Akashic records. The Anunnaki was a hybridized race of beings from a star system called Sirius C. So A lot of people think Sirius, which is actually our brightest star in our night sky, because it's relatively close to Earth, it's only 8 light years from Earth or something like that. But Sirius was actually comprised of 3 stars, not to one. So there was Sirius A, B, and C. So Sirius was kind of very similar to Orion, a lot of diversity of beings that lived in Sirius. And there was also reptilian colonies in Sirius, particularly Sirius C. So in order to create unification in Sirius, there was quite a bit of genetic mixing between, I guess, human and reptilian genetics. So there was a hybridized race of human reptilian or reptilian humanoids that visited Earth a long time ago and had an interest of maybe colonizing Earth. And there was and they started mucking around with the genetics of the indigenous humans that lived on Earth at the time. So a lot of people don't realize this, but humans actually have 12-strand DNA, or used to at one time. And then when Anunnaki started doing their genetic manipulation, they dismantled 10 of the 12 strands because they didn't want humans to surpass them. They wanted to utilize them for their own purposes, which was mainly to mine gold and, be their so was there once again, I don't think all the Anunnaki were evil. There were some factions that I think were pro-Earth human and wanted to help the humans, but some people say, oh, that's, Enki versus Enlil. Enlil was, I guess, the evil one, and Enki was the good one. But beyond Enki and Enlil, I do think they originated from Sirius C. And they, I think, destroyed the human genome so much that humans were dying young and women were dying in childbirth. And so, they just weren't surviving. So they had to ask some of their Syrian cohorts from, Sirius A and B to help them strengthen the human genetics. So for that reason, I would say the vast majority of us here on Earth, if we're human, we probably have a certain percentage of Syrian DNA. I would say pretty much 90% of us, if not more. We have, varying Syrian genetics, and then the Pleiadians and the Aldebaran and the Procyon also contributed to our genetics, so we're kind of a Heinz 57 of a lot of different star races, to be quite honest, so that's why amongst Earth people, you see so much diversity, very diverse here on Earth. We got all kinds of different races, and also, I think it kind of contributes to us having the ability to ascend very quickly. So ascension, in star systems took a very, very long time. It just took forever. Here on Earth, we're going, it's only taking us, a couple of thousand years, so it's, so relative, so it may seem like, but it really isn't when you're, looking at the grand scope of it. But I hope that answers your question. I don't know. I maybe have digressed a little bit, but anyway, yeah. This is kind of like my view of some of these reptilian factions and the Anunnaki, and it's like any other. It's like humans. There's good humans. There's bad humans. There's the same for these star races. There's even negative Pleiadian factions, if you can imagine that. So even there's not, there's Pleiadians that are not of the light, so that blows people's minds, because I think sometimes we have a tendency to put these beings in a box, like, okay, you're in this box and you're in that box, but there's a lot of diversity amongst these beings.
Yeah, thank you. I know you said you're a starseed intuitive, and one of the questions I would love to ask you is, what's the difference from a starseed to a soul?
Okay,
is there a difference?
So what is a starseed? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, what is a starseed, and what is a soul?
Okay, so we're all soul force, so I know that sounds crazy when you think about it in terms of earth religion, because we've always had this sense that, we're separated from God. But in reality, we've never been separated from God or source. We're all individualized expressions of God. So with that being said, so in the beginning, God, split itself off into two factions: Mother Goddess consciousness energy and the Father God consciousness energy. And then beyond that, split itself off even further into oversouls. And so most of us have souls that have existed for millions and millions of years. We've been reincarnating, incarnating in various different star systems. And now, we have a contract with planet Earth. We're doing our time here. And contrary to what many people might believe, we've actually chosen to be here. So we've chosen to be here on Earth. But to get to your question about what is a starseed, so a starseed is somebody that's having an Earth human experience or an Earth human incarnation at this time, but their soul originated from another star system. So they may have incarnated in other star systems before having incarnations here on Earth. And according to Dolores Cannon and many others who have, also done this work, the vast majority of us in this current timeline, there's quite a few Earth souls. So there's quite a few younger souls here on Earth that have only had incarnations on Earth. They're younger souls. But there's actually, I would say, there's a higher percentage of starseeds on the planet right at now in this timeline than there ever has been, probably since the time of Atlantis. So, and a lot of us have come here to assist with the ascension process. So this is the transition from, the third dimension to the fifth dimension. And I love the work that you're doing, because you're out there trying to, share truth, and you're trying to expand people's consciousness. And I respect that, because, we need people of all different backgrounds and types, to share this information, because there's so many humans right now that are still asleep. They don't know what's going on, and they're suffering because of it. They're just living these mundane, I got to go to work, I got to pay my taxes, I got to pay my bills, kind of lives, when they haven't realized that they're part of something much bigger. That they're just stuck in this 3D matrix construct. That's not real. At least that's what the Arcturians say. But that's a star seed. And so I get a lot of times people will ask me questions like, okay, so what star system am I from? I don't have any idea where I'm from. And a lot of times, other than maybe having a reading, so you can have a reading and somebody can tell you, I just intuitively know what star systems we align with. The work, if we really kind of meditated and centered ourselves and asked our higher guides, where did I come from? I do think we do get those answers. Because a lot of times when I was doing akashic readings, I would tell somebody, "Oh, you're Andromedan," and they said, "Yeah, I always had this I was, yeah." And I was like, I was hearing this all the time. "Oh, or you're from Sirius B," and they will be like, "Oh yeah, I always felt connected with mermaids and water and oceans." Okay, they already knew it; they just wanted that confirmation. So I think, a lot of us kind of have an inner knowing, maybe we're not tapped into it yet, but we know that, hey, I'm aligned with a certain star system. Or I remember having lifetimes there, so, and a lot of us have had lifetimes in more than just one system. So when I used to do Akashic readings individually for people, I would tell them, oh, you were in this star system, and that star system, and that star system. And it would surprise them because they expected me to tell them, oh, you're Pleiadian, or oh, you're this. And we're multidimensional beings. We've had experiences in a lot of different areas, a lot of different places. But maybe there's certain systems bigger influence on us than others, So usually when I was doing a reading, I would try to focus in on those key star systems. But none of us is just one thing, if that makes sense. But yeah, I do get that question. Still to this day, people ask me, what star system am I? Where am I from? And I'm just like, well, I do teach a course called Discovering Your Star Origins. There's a little webinar that's on my training page of my website. So if people are really curious, they could, and it's a very inexpensive little course, they can take that and it might give them some hints or, some traits that they can, associate with that. I hope I answered your question. So,
oh, you did. Thank you. I appreciate it. And, I remember when I was a kid, I remember just pausing and thinking as a young little boy, whatever I could imagine exists somewhere else in the universe.
That's very
when
true.
you brought up mermaids, I remember thinking that, I had this inner knowing. I remembered a few past lives, and I wouldn't even call them past lives. I remember a life where it was similar to Star Wars as a young kid. So whenever I would watch Indiana Jones or some of those old Chinese kung fu movies, or I'd watch Star Wars, I knew I had this inner knowing I'd been there. It's weird.
Yeah, no, I used to feel that way too. For some reason, I really associated very much with Star Trek, and I loved, the whole Trek genre. I mean, I probably watched Star Trek more so than I did Star Wars until just recently. But then I started realizing as I'm more tuned in that, I spent lifetimes working in the Galactic Federation, and this reminds me of the Galactic Federation. So, and that's probably why I was attracted to the military for a while. There was aspects of the military that has structure that might have seemed very similar to the Federation. So if a lot of us may even associate or feel an association with certain popular movies, either fantasy or sci-fi movies, because it reminds us of lifetimes that we've had. Just like you with the certain components that you really aligned with. But yeah, Star Wars, I think a lot of us feel a connection with Star Wars. Had incarnations in Orion, so we really associate quite a bit with, that system, and with maybe even with the Lyran Wars, so that happened millions and millions of years ago, but that was when the reps made some of the Lyran planets, so so a lot of us still carry trauma from that time. It sounds kind of incredible, but it was, such a traumatic event that, we still have soul memory of it.
Oh yeah, thank you. That's another main question I wanted to ask you, because I love talking about trauma, right?
Yeah.
And I'm actually writing a book on addiction with trauma, but what really interests me is past life trauma and now galactic trauma. We can actually carry that into this life.
Seen it all
the time. And I love
how
you touch on epigenetics.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I see it all the time with, I used to do another type of reading called akashic clearings, so I was helping to clear out old patterns and old traumas, from people's akashic records. And one of the things I saw continuously is that people repeat patterns of trauma lifetime after lifetime in order to, I think, clear out either the karma of what happened or have an opportunity to do things differently. So it's kind of like, you're playing a video game and you're stuck on the level and, you're thinking, oh, I can't keep doing the same thing over and over again because I'm going to continue to be stuck. So let me do something a little different next time so I can reach the next level. Well, is very similar to that, where, sometimes we're thinking, why am I going through this again? Because when I've dealt with this in past lifetimes, it's because it's giving us an opportunity to do things better, and to ascend from that level to a different, higher level, so, and quite a few of my clients actually feel very much connection to Lyra, so there was a lot of trauma that came out of Lyra. And I had to work through my own trauma from Lyra because I had past lives there, and it was pretty traumatic. And there was times where I would just cry for days over what happened in Lyra when I started remembering what happened there. But there's a lot of the trauma that we were exposed to in Lyra revolves around loss and betrayal. So there was a loss of the home worlds, the beautiful paradise planets, and then also the betrayal of these, these reptilian beings that were pretending to be friends, but were actually just out to conquer, the Lyran people, So these are still themes that we see over and over and over again. And maybe one way people deal with those themes is through addiction, so maybe addiction makes the memories a little easier or makes them forget the memories. I don't know, but it'll be an interesting topic to explore at some point, like what role does addiction play in reliving galactic trauma, so that's something we might have to have a conversation about at a later date. But
yeah,
I wish you all the best with your work. It sounds fascinating.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Knowing all this stuff now, how does that change your view on the Bible? I mean, do you look at it kind of like Paul Wallace these days? I know Paul Wallace talks about like ETs. Paul Wallace, he connects ETs with the Bible. Some of these gods, like Yahweh.
Yeah, I have to look into his work. It sounds fascinating.
He's been on Regina and George Nuri.
Yeah, I'm sure. If he's connecting ETs with the Bible, I'm sure he's all over the place at this point. But but yeah, I see the Bible kind of like. So I think a lot of the Bible was probably that they were taking stories. So I think the Sumerians had direct connections with extraterrestrials. They were writing about it, and then the Israelites, was taking information from the Sumerians and compiling their own in the Bible. But there's parts of the Bible that I think is more allegorical, like the story was not, they weren't real people, but they were maybe representing something. And I do think that a lot of the encounters people had with angels were probably with extraterrestrial beings. So maybe, and it's not to say that angels aren't real or angels, I've had my own personal encounters with angels. I know they're real. But it could be that, some accounts in the Bible, when they were talking about, massive, wheels in the sky and things like that, might have been talking about UFOs, or maybe there was events that happened that were influenced by extraterrestrials that were visiting planet Earth, So I would say I'm more in agreement with that person you mentioned. But yeah, it did change my view on how I saw the Bible. But I think even before, I always had questions about it, like, because some of the things didn't make sense, It's kind of like, okay, if Adam and Eve were the only people and they had two sons, and how the sons find wives, it doesn't make any sense, and so there had to be other people there, obviously. But yeah, there's so I think it kind of better explains, maybe some of the events that were happening.
How do you look at the Adam and Eve story? I've heard you touch on that. That was profound.
Yeah, that was one I struggled with, because I just couldn't see how one man and one woman could have an influence on all the diversity that's throughout the planet. It just didn't make sense to me. So that's how I see it. And maybe, people don't agree with me, and they don't have to. I mean, it's just my viewpoint on it. But the way I see Adam and Eve is that I think Adam and Eve are representations of Lyra and Vega. So it was the mother goddess races and the father god consciousness races. And their interaction with the serpent was representative of their interaction with Draco, so because the serpent deceived Eve and Draco deceived Lawrence. So I see correlations between that story. And then they were ousted from paradise, which was, the Garden of Eden in the Bible, which maybe was representative of Avalon and Avion in the Lyra system. So they got, sent out of their paradise planets, so that's pretty much how I see that story. And like I said, it's just my interpretation, and maybe other people don't agree, and that's fine. We all have our theories on what really happened. But I honestly believe that there was extraterrestrial beings that were visiting Earth millions of years ago, and were probably tinkering around with human genetics even way, way back then. So that's why we see so much diversity throughout the planet, because we're all this Heinz 57 of different star races, and fortunately, I guess the Syrians were able to boost our genetics, at least to the point where we're not back to 12 strands of DNA, but at least we're able to ascend and connect with God, so that's always a really good thing. And we can all connect with our divinity, which is always, that's, I guess, the ultimate goal while we're here is to be able to connect with Source and with our divinity and our divine selves.
Yeah, thank you. What ET races were blue? Because you see Krishna blue. Was he an ET? Do you believe Krishna?
I believe so. I believe the Vedic accounts were accounts of extraterrestrial visitation. Most of them were associated with Vega. Vega was the original conscious race, so those beings were blue. And so when they were talking about these blue-skinned extraterrestrial beings visiting Earth with advanced technology, so they had these abilities that Earth humans didn't have. Syrian races are also blue, so because Syrian beings were a mix of Lyra and Vega genetics, they were more light blue skin, and then the Andromedans were also blue skinned, but more so because of their environment on their planets rather than because of genetics. So you see blue skinned beings, throughout, and I often get the question, well, why blue? And it's because blue is a high vibrational color. It was so high vibrational that ancient humans, especially after Egypt, couldn't even see the color blue. I mean, it didn't exist for ancient humans until, much later on in history, where we started being able to see the color again. So yeah, these beings are very aligned with higher vibrations, so they carry that vibration.
Yeah, thank you. How do you look at Jesus today and Buddha and Krishna? Were they just like enlightened, like Jedi masters in a sense? Or were they from other?
I would say ascended masters. So I kind of see Jesus having components of Syrian and Pleiadian genetics. So I think he embodies both, those star energies. And he was an ascended master. He was a ninth dimensional ascended master. He was to come to Earth in order to teach people, about love consciousness and Christ consciousness, but people didn't quite understand his message. Their consciousness wasn't expanded enough to understand it to the level that he was intending. The same with Buddha. So I think there was masters, Saint Germain, Buddha, Jesus, that were on Earth trying to help raise consciousness, to varying, I would say, mixed results. Okay, so mixed results. And and obviously they were getting killed, I mean, people didn't like what they had to share. So I think the Galactic Council decided at some point we just can't send 2 teachers. We got to send a lot of teachers, So that's part of the role of the starseeds, is that we're here to help raise consciousness. But instead of just 1 or 2 of them, us here, there's a lot of us here right now. And it's not that we're Jesus or Buddha or anything like that, although we might, bring components of that energy, but all of us are here to help raise consciousness and to help prepare humans for this ascension, So yeah, I have great respect for those beings that came before us, because they were like going into the wild, wild west. I mean, they were, stepping out into uncharted territory. And it took a lot of, I would say, courage, to go to this ignorant planet where, people didn't know anything, and trying to share spiritual truths and be, I would say, persecuted for it, So it takes a lot of courage. And I think they kind of blazed a way for the rest of us starseeds to come here and do our work, like your truth, you're sharing the truth, I'm trying to share the truth in my own way, So we're all trying to do different aspects of it.
I'm going to ask you a couple more small questions, and then we'll end it with that. But I know it's getting a little late.
Okay.
Were you ever shown anything about the ancient pyramids that we find all over the world with the akashic records?
Yeah, a lot of those pyramids were aligned with certain star systems. Okay, so if we're talking about the pyramids of Giza, so Egypt was very influenced by Sirius and Orion. But when you look at the 3 pyramids of Giza, they're all the Orion belt stars. And even Sphinx at one time had a lion face, didn't always have a human face. At least that's how I saw it in the Akashic records. And then the shaft of the pyramids are aligned with Sirius. When I was doing some traveling across Mexico, and I went to Chichen Itza, it was like all of the pyramids there were aligned with the Pleiades. So these were all star systems that had heavy influences on these particular civilizations. So the Mayans were actually connected with the Maya star system in the Pleiades, and that's an actual star system, and with Merope. And they knew this, and so they were aligning all their and I think that's true of all of these different pyramids throughout the world, that they're aligned with certain star systems, and maybe to channel in that frequency or that energy, So, I'm not an expert at this, but I have seen enough of it in the records to know that it's no accident that they're aligned with these star systems. I know even in Chichen Itza, I think there were certain smaller pyramids and temples there that were aligned with Venus, so they were probably Venusians, so there's I would say a great component of that all throughout the world.
Appreciate that. And I'm going to ask my last. Yeah. It's from my friend who's going to be on this show soon, Annalise, and she asked, from a galactic historian perspective, what would you say about the morality of the galactic history? Can you elaborate on how it may reflect our current times, and any suggestions that will support our collective choosing for evolution of life? So
that's a really great question.
Yeah.
As far as morality, she's talking about Earth morality, or the morality of these different star races, or
star races.
I guess I'm not star races. I would say they've gone through their own evolution, and they weren't perfect. They made mistakes. I think, for the most part, they had their own struggles. So they went through a similar evolution that we're going through right now, where maybe at one time they struggled with duality consciousness, but were able to achieve unity consciousness at some point. And I do believe that we have that potential even here on Earth. I know we're, an extreme duality consciousness here, but, and it seems like there's a lot of people on the dark side, and, there's those of us on the light side that are trying to, balance, the playing field. But I do think, we are going to, find our way, at least that, otherwise we wouldn't be here, but it may take a while, it may not happen as quickly as a lot of us would like it to see it happen, but I do hope that we start, and at least that's the timeline I've been given, is that I think things are going to start really shifting towards the end of this decade. So I don't think things are going to stay the same, and the matrix is crumbling around us. It's not our government, the monetary system, it's all crumbling. So I think we are going to see massive societal changes, on this planet in the next few years. But a rocky ride for a while. It's not going to be, sunshine and roses, at least not yet. But yeah, great question. I hope I answered it. But that's my perspective, is that I think, the other thing too with planet Earth is that Earth is one of the few planets that's still stuck in the third dimension. And so the reason why extraterrestrial beings are so interested in seeing us ascend is because if we don't ascend here on Earth, they can't ascend any further. So it's kind of holding back the ascension for all of these systems, not just our system. So there is a vested interest to see Earth succeed, in the ascension process. So that we can all become part of the greater galactic family, which is why I'm here. So, but anyway, this has been really interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you again for your patience on getting me on the calendar, and I wish you all the best with your work. I hope you are able to reach a lot of people.
Thank you. David Icke once said the Earth needs more rebels, and I just want to thank you for helping us create a revolution of consciousness, because it is expanding. Thanks to people like you.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and
thank you.
Many blessings to you and your listeners.